Howdy bubs and welcome back. Today we're going to be jumping into GameMaker and taking a look at how to create boss battles and add that into our game. This is one of the extra bonus features that I'm going to be running just based off of different recommendations from different students. So let's go ahead and take a look at one way to implement bosses to the game. So there'll be two things we're going to need to address. First, creating an enemy boss, and then creating a mechanic to keep track of that in the spawner. I'm going to quickly just create a sprite. I'm just going to duplicate the existing one. It'll be enemy or SPR underscore enemy underscore boss. And so let's go ahead and make sure we go to the enemy boss, edit this one. I'm just going to grab, let me just place a circle inside of here. Sure, that looks good enough. And then I might as well just use the triangle. Click, click, click. Okay, good enough. Beautiful, work of art. I have something clearly identifiable as a different type of enemy. This is the boss. With this, we are going to go ahead and I'm going to create another object, and this is going to be obj underscore enemy underscore boss. I'm going to make sure I select my sprite, but I'm going to add a extra little bit. Because most of the code for our boss is actually going to be identical to the enemies, I'm actually going to declare this to be a child of the enemy. So our boss, its parent is the obj enemy. It actually inherits all of the code. The create code specifies this. It adds to our spawner, selects random sprites, and all of this. We're going to have to modify this. Whenever it destroys itself, it decrements the total number of enemies present, increases the score, and keeps track of the enemies killed. And then the step, what does it do exactly as it continues on? So I'm going to actually want to modify some elements of this. In destroy, we're actually going to keep most of this step. We actually don't need to change anything in the step event. The step event simply chases the player. So this portion is good. Destroy event, decrease this, increase the number of enemies killed, increase by worth, drop something, and then play the sound defeated. In our create event, we're going to go ahead and grab a few lines of these codes. I'm going to Control C to copy that. We don't need any of this. Oh, we also need this portion. So actually I'm going to Control C all of it for the moment. I'm going to right click and I'm going to override. Override means I'm not going to inherit from the parent. I'm instead going to completely replace the code. Now, these randomized stats we do not need in ours. I'm actually going to keep, just for convenience sake, some of these values here. Just because we've already written this code, might as well just keep it for our convenience. We need all of this, but the size, I'm going to go ahead and make this much larger than a standard. Actually, I'll make it 1.5 times the size. So not incredibly huge, but at a decent scale. So it increases the sizing just a bit, slows it down a little bit. But for the health, I'm going to change this. Rather than just being 2 times the size, it'll be 5 times our size. And the worth will be correspondingly set up. And we will create a health bar. So we just removed that little section that dealt with randomizing our sprite. In our delete event, or destroy event, all of this looks good. Step event, this is all looking good. Yep, we should be good to go. We can go and jump into our spawning object, whatever spawner you have. Over here, we're going to add another thing we're going to keep track of, and I will say that this is how many levels until a boss appears. So boss level will be equal to, and I want mine every 10 levels. You can change this to whatever you want. I'm going to set it to be 10. In our step event, we're going to go ahead and see this is making sure it spawns, increases it appropriately. But what I want to do here with enemies per wave, this is spawning new enemies and decrementing them appropriately. I'm going to instead have a check. If our current level, or current wave actually, I'm going to rename this to be wave. If enemy per wave is perfectly divisible by our boss wave, and so that means if our current wave number can be divided by the boss wave, we will then create a boss. Otherwise, we run this portion of the code. So in here, if this is true, this gets indented over one level. If this does not equal 0, we run the normal code. So if the number, if our current wave number is not divisible by, in my case, 10, meaning that it has a remainder of 0, this is the modulus operator, I've discussed this before. If it is not perfectly divisible by 10, resulting in a 0 remainder, run the code as normal. Otherwise, else, I'm going to spawn a boss. In here, I'm going to create a simple instance underscore create layer, and it'll also be in a random position. I can actually just copy this directly, but rather than obj enemy, it'll be obj enemy boss. So now it'll create only one enemy. Enemies per wave increases by 1, and wave number increases appropriately as well. Just because of the way that my program has been set up, my enemy per wave matches my wave number. If yours is different, then you might want to do this instead to check with the game manager as to what the current wave number is. Again, depends on how you did this. Maybe you have more enemies appear than is standard. In that case, work with whatever system that you have. This will be the more appropriate one if this number ends up diverging. And then also we need to make sure we create a random position that works correctly. I forgot to remove this one line right here in my randomizing stats. We don't actually need this portion here. That was accidentally resulting in a mistake. So there we go. We start off with the boss. So with this system, starting off, the program runs and determines that boss wave or wave number initially is 0. Boss wave is then checked, and that means we start off with an enemy boss right off the stat. We begin with the boss appearing immediately. And then after that, it'll be every 10 levels. Now that we have confirmed that the enemy boss does appear, as we see here, and I can see the stats are appropriate. In this case, 7.5 is the worth. let's add in some type of special mechanic. What I'm going to do, in addition to boosting up his health, I'm actually going to make him just stay the normal size, but boost his health to be a little bit more. I want to allow for my enemy to create projectiles that fire off towards the player, and if the player is hit by them, the player loses health. We're going to make an alarm for attacking. So alarm 0 is going to be equal to, in this case, I want the enemy boss to trigger this attack maybe every 5 seconds. Now I can go ahead and add the code for alarm 0. And in here, this is attack. What my enemy is boss is going to do, other than having better stats, it will also fire at the enemy in a full ring. I'm simply going to create a for loop for var I is equal to 0 while I is less than, in this case, 360, I plus plus. Then inside here, I will go ahead and specify. Actually, I'm going to replace I with angle, just to be clear what this value is. Our angle is going to be applied to creating a projectile and launching it in the correct direction. But we're not going to use the same projectile. We're going to use a similar to the enemy boss being a parent of the enemy. I'm going to just take the similar code from the projectile, but instead apply it towards the player instead. But for this code, I'm actually going to go over to the player and grab the code I wrote for launching the projectile. In our key event for spacebar, this actually creates a new projectile. I'm just going to copy this and throw it inside here. Indent this over one level. And rather than our direction matching the image angle, I'm going to set this to be other dot angle. Image angle will match the appropriate direction, and this will just launch this out everywhere, starting from angle of 0 all the way to an angle of 359. I do, however, want to not create it as an OBJ projectile, because right now our projectile will actually hit and harm the enemy, and by extension, since the enemy boss is a child of the enemy boss itself. I'm going to create a new object. This will be obj underscore projectile boss. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the sprite as well and make it slightly different. There we go. That is the enemy's projectile. Over here, I'm going to grab that sprite, and the parent is going to be the normal projectile. It has all of the appropriate code. When fired, it will keep track of shots fired. Actually, I don't want this. I'm going to override this. We don't want to add this to the player shots fired, although I think I do want to keep. No, this would be too many sounds since we're going to launch a lot very quickly. So I'm going to override this. We don't have anything in here. If I collide with an enemy, this actually shouldn't happen. So we also override that. We don't want any issues where it accidentally damages itself. With our obstacles, we do want it to destroy itself. Whenever it exits the room, we do want it to destroy itself. But now, whenever I make contact with the enemy player, collision with our player, I not only want to hit the player. I not only want to do instance underscore destroy self, but I do want to damage the player. So other.hp minus equals, and however much damage you want them to suffer, I'm going to say 1. Now we have this set up. We will hit the player and deal damage. Do nothing whenever we collide with an enemy during the crit event. Also nothing special. But whenever we leave the room, we destroy ourselves, and whenever we collide with an obstacle, we destroy ourselves. So that's all good. Going back to our boss. Now that I have the for loop, it'll create 360 of these in the projectiles layer, starting with our central position. And then I want to create a sound. So the sound ID, I'm going to use the same projectile sound. No modification on the priority. False. And then my gain. I'm going to ignore that. I want to modify the offset. Gain, no gain, no modification on it. The offset, I'm going to make it as 10 and see what that sounds like. And the pitch will also be 10. So now after 5 seconds, it'll trigger this. Then I'm going to add into our step event to trigger it again. And then set attack to be false. It is not ready to attack. We can also make sure over here attack is equal to false. In the step event, we want to keep all of this code, but I'm going to add to it. I'm going to inherit it, so we get all of the code there, and then add boss attack. Over here, I will then, if it cannot attack, then we're going to activate the alarm for 300 steps. And the attack is now true. So that way it doesn't accidentally trigger the alarm and reset it constantly. After 300 steps, it triggers the alarm, the attack occurs, attack is set back to false. And then once it's false, it'll reactivate the alarm immediately afterwards. So every 5 seconds, roughly, we should get this wave going out. Oh, I've realized this is keeping track of what speed the player fires these projectiles. I'm going to fire these projectiles at 5 pixels per step. With that, we should be good for our speed. And then with direction, I realized in order to access this value inside of this with statement, we do have to remove the var, so that way angle can exist and be accessed from the direction portion of this code. Now we should be good to run. My enemy is there. After about 5 seconds, we see there's the ring. We see I've taken damage from it. And there we go. It now has this wave attack, and if I'm going to protect myself, I need to hide behind the obstacles. So I played around with the numbers a bit more to get some things fixed. So the gain by default is 1. The pitch, the offset is how late in the song it gets played. That is supposed to be 0, so that way it doesn't play the sound at the wrong point. And then I lowered this so that way it sounds better. And so with this, let me go ahead and set my game to play the audio, and you can see how it currently looks. And so we see that effect whenever the boss fires. It actually causes a disruption with the music, and it's lowered, and so it's kind of interesting sounding. But that's all we have for now. That is how you can create an enemy boss, add it into the game, and get some neat mechanics going for boss battles. If you have any questions or need assistance, let me know in class. Everyone, have a good one. I just wanted to say thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Shout out to my bad bubs, my top 5, my day ones. Y'all have always been there for me. Next up, my baby bubs, the next 5. I always love y'all's support. And finally, for everyone else, any little bit helps. Thank you to all my basic bubs for supporting me along my journey. If you want to continue receiving notifications, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell button.